Thank you, Jess, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Valeria, and I am a data analyst for the Impact team, and I will also be facilitating today's meeting. Alessandro and Faith, could you also introduce yourselves?
Yeah, of course. Good morning for those of you who are still in their morning, and good afternoon for anyone who's this side of the world. My name is Alessandro. I'm the founder of Ashoka in Italy and the director. But at the same time, I also founded the Ashoka Impact and Evidence Unit in 2018 to better help us measure the impact of our work.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Faith and I work as a research associate in the Impact and Evidence team at Ashoka, mainly on doing research and designing measurement tools, one of which we're going to be sharing today. So thank you all for joining us. I'm really excited about this.
Thank you. We are also very curious to know who's joining us today, so please comment on the chat box, your name, your school, and where you're calling from. School or organization is fine. So I'm going to be sharing my screen today. And before we begin, we want to ask you to join us, please, in a short mindfulness practice. So if you have pen and paper with you, if you can please write down one thing you are grateful for today and one thing that may keep you from being present. I'll give you a minute to write it down and just let you meditate on that. If you can, just take a deep breath in, and as you do, just let that thing that you are grateful for sink in. And as you slowly exhale, please write down that one thing that may keep you from being present. And again, we'll do this for about a minute. All right, thank you, and welcome everyone. And I see that you all are writing in where you're coming from. So thank you so much for joining us. And I'm just going to have this down here. Before we begin, and I turn it over to Alessandro, I have a few logistics to present. So for today, we're going to ask that if you can please put away any devices that may be distracting to you, whether that is a cell phone, social media, even any school assignments that you may have for later. If you can please put those away. And also, if you have any questions as we share our presentation, please write them in our chat box. We will only be taking questions that are written in. So if you have any questions now or later, we will be having a Q&A at the end of the presentation, at which point we'll go through all the questions in the chat box, or as many as we can. All right, and with that, Alessandro, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Valeria, and welcome everyone. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. I guess just like all of you, this was going to be my first Ashoka U exchange, but I had been setting my sight on it for a few years. I joined Ashoka in 2015, and I built Ashoka Italy. And as the scope of our work was growing, I remember telling Diana Wells, the president of our organization, that we could have done a lot better in measuring our impact. And as it's often the case at Ashoka, this organization of entrepreneurs, when you're the one flagging a problem, you're asked to be the part of the solution. So Diana told me, yeah, I agree. I think you should do it. And from that moment onwards, I was given the task to rethink about how we impact, how we measure our impact. We started with our fellowship program, which has been going on for years, and we had already standard measures that needed to be adapted. And then we got to the very difficult task of measuring change making and try to make sense of what goes with change making in an area that has been newer for Ashoka, even if by now it's been 10 years or so that we are into this field. So it's very much necessary to agree on what we mean and how, and then propose a way in which we can measure it. As you can see with this quote, but I think you would agree that that's the case. Generally speaking, what is becoming increasingly more valuable in society, in school, in university for getting jobs, but even what we see as needed to be good citizens is not so much what we know, what we have learned, and not even what skills we have, but the constant ability to adapt to change. As the world continues to change incredibly rapidly, as the last few weeks have shown even more than in the past, we need to continuously be proactive about change. And that's what change making is all about. Next slide, please. And to us, there's almost the element of a new inequality here between not just those who thrive and don't thrive because they have the right qualifications or because they have the right they were born in the right family or they have the right access to money or education, but increasingly we see a world in which those who are able to be change makers can thrive a lot more than those who are not able to do so. This is the core of all of our programs, and what we realized is that until we make it clear what goes with being a change maker, we cannot influence the discourse as we wish we were. So in the last year, we've worked on this Changemaker Index, and we were going to have the world preview of this index in Minneapolis with all of you. Sadly, that wasn't possible, but still we're doing this now online. We've shared it with a few partners, but this is the first time that we go in depth with a bunch of people who know what we're talking about, have expertise in the field that can give us very precious feedback. Next. So where does the need from this new measurement come from? We have identified these elements of a new framework that we need for living and working in the radically different world that I have defined. So we realized that, and this was by studying the journeys that our fellows and young change makers that are part of our network and have been part of our network for 40 years had engaged in, that there are four main elements that make a change maker. This is cognitive empathy, or the ability to put yourself in other people's shoes, but and a series of other social and emotional intelligence skills that go with it. The ability to thrive in team of teams, meaning that it's no longer just about teamwork. It's about teams switching constantly and changing, and sometimes taking shape not just within an organization but outside of organization. Is new leadership, meaning and I don't want to get into the million theories of leadership that are out there, but is, and we'll go into the elements in a second, is the ability to not always be a leader, to know when it's your turn to be a leader, when it's your turn to follow, when it's your turn to leave the leadership space to someone else, and being able to act that way. And it's obviously about practicing change making. These are all the skills that we've learned from the social entrepreneurs in themselves. And Faith then will give us more details about what all of this means. So these 4 elements were the basis of the tool we have developed. The assumption here is this constitute the paradigm for success. And as I said, we have tried to include partners around the world to work with us towards this aim, but we realized that without being able to measure this, it would be much harder to get new partners on board. And that's why we hope that this measurement can help anyone else who believes in change making and change making skills having an easier time pushing for these skills to become mainstream in everything we do, from education to other fields. So at Ashoka, with everything we do, we measure impact at 3 levels. The first level, what we call direct delivery or customer satisfaction, is what most impact measurement focus on. For example, how satisfied were you with this workshop? And I'm sure you'll get a questionnaire from Ashoka you about this forum and the exchange aspects of it. Should the sessions be longer or shorter? So whatever we do with our fellows and our constituents, we obviously want to measure whether what we've done had an impact on them. But most of all, it's important for us to measure things at 2 other levels. Is working with Ashoka affecting how people think? And that's what we call framework change. But also, is it affecting systems? Are we changing the default for everyone so that people no longer need us to push for a certain change because it has become the new norm for everyone? We do this with our fellowship program, but we want to do also with our education and youth, and obviously Ashoka U field. So the platform with the index we have built, and we'll show you in a minute, also tries to tap into these different levels. Framework change is a new level that we've been thinking on in the last few years. Whether system change has been at the core of the Ashoka model for a long time, meaning the ultimate aim of social entrepreneurship is not just to increase the number of people that we affect directly, but to change systems for everyone. For example, if I change the student evaluation in college, if I change how I recruit my students, what I value there, even if I leave the institution in a couple of years, this stays on and becomes the new normal. While we need system change, we need also framework changes. So we need to make people think differently and find and make sure they also act different as a consequence. For example, literacy as a core skill was created in the Industrial Revolution to allow people to function in this new world where you needed to be able to read and function with basic numbers to make the whole Fordist machine run. In the new world that we have described, our change-making skills as necessarily as reading and writing. That's what we believe, and we want everyone to start thinking differently around this issue. Next slide, and it's my last one. Just the final point that Ashoka in itself, and I'm sure some of you have seen this, this publication before, has worked particularly with Ashoka U to translate these needs into implications for assessment. What we've done in the past was to interview a lot of you and see how your institutions evaluate changemaker skills among their students, but also among faculties and other stakeholders. What we're going to do today is try to propose our own framework, which we hope can inform the assessment you have in other institutions, and at the same time we hope to be to receive your feedback and be able to change further what we're doing and improve it further. What we're showing you is still in the beta phase. We hope to finalize it after having consulted with many practitioners, from higher education to youth work to education. And while I set out in the last year the journey that took us to this index, Faith, who joined our team last summer, was the main researcher who got herself busy full-time on this. So I think she's the most indicated person to give us the details of it. Thank you very much for listening.
All right, so I am going to spend the next about 10 minutes taking you through the tool itself, what it is, how we built it, what it looks like. So let's start with some overall definitions. So we're calling the tool the Changemaker Index, and in its current iteration, it's a self-assessment tool in the form of an online questionnaire that does three main things. One, for anyone interested in seeing where they are in their change-making journey, the tool helps them map that, and someone can see, how far along they are. And then secondly, it assesses various change-making skills that we've identified as essential. And most importantly, it provides respondents with customized resources depending on where they are on their journey, so they can continue to advance and to strengthen those change-making skills. Now, how does this tool tie back to the new measures Alessandro was talking about? So at the individual level, it really helps anyone answer the question, am I a change maker? But on top of that, it helps answer a bigger question, which is, what is the change maker density of my organization or my community or my group or my company? And we really think that this metric, change maker density, so the concentration of change makers in any different group, in any community, is going to be the kind of indicator we need in the current world to reliably predict, the success of any given group. Next slide, please. So here's a summary of the process of how we constructed this tool. We started with pinning down definitions for what exactly a change maker is, and then moving on to breaking down the 4 elements of Ashoka's framework that Alessandro listed at the beginning into skills that can be assessed. Now, I'm going to go into that a bit in the coming slides, but just to highlight the rest of the process. So after breaking down those 4 elements into skills, we did some literature review, both consulting work that had been done at Ashoka and elsewhere, where we were looking at work that has been done by practitioners, by educators, by scholars on really what the most important change-making attributes are. And we use all of that research to inform our framework. And then after that, so based on what we had learned from the literature review, we revisited those skills that we had broken down and recompiled them in a better way. And then the next step was curating questionnaire statements corresponding to each of those change-making skills that we had identified. And once those were in place, we had to figure out, does this work? Do these statements actually measure the skills we want to measure? So we we had 2 rounds of validation tests with a number of professors we're working with at the University of Warsaw in Poland. And we were able to see how valid and how reliable the tool is in actually assessing these change-making skills. Now, I'm going to go into a bit of what I mentioned at the beginning, the 4 elements of Ashoka's framework, the definitions of those. Next slide, please. So here is a breakdown and definitions of those elements. The first one being empathy. And that's really the ability to be aware of and to understand our own and others' feelings and perspectives, and to be able to use that understanding to guide our actions. And then another important element is sophisticated teamwork, or what we call team of teams. And this is based on the idea that we have to move away from a framework where people are tied down by their, say, their professional roles, and embrace opportunities to have people form new groups based on interest, based on a new problem they share, or things they care about. And so this ability is really how one is able to thrive in that kind of flexible, dynamic system that changes often. And then there's new leadership, which the core is being able to shift from being, always a leader, but also learning how to follow, and being able to invite everyone to be a contributor in a space, and share the kind of big picture or the vision. And then now there's practicing change making, and this is where someone actually takes action to solve a problem, and this is where someone is coming up with a solution that's more effective, efficient, sustainable, or more just than existing solutions. And where the overall goal, and this is very important, is that it's for the good of all. Now, the reason we have this in a cycle like this is because once someone is beginning to take action, these other elements, empathy and new leadership and sophisticated teamwork, continue to build over time. And so it's a kind of a self-reinforcing system. Someone grows more empathetic, and these elements become even stronger. So after we pin down these definitions here, we broke these into the skills I was mentioning, and I'm going to share a bit, some examples of that. Next slide, please. So in this 4-part, the quadrants, you will see examples of skills we identified under each element. I'll read out just a few examples. So under empathy, on the top left, we have self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, compassionate empathy, and relationship skills. And then under sophisticated teamwork, on the top right, you have skills like sharing responsibility, conflict resolution, resource mobilization. We have the same under new leadership, that big picture thinking that I was mentioning in the previous slide, ability to role change and activating others. So pulling in others into the big game. And then practicing change making, which has a whole range of skills from curiosity to creative thinking and problem solving, to resilience. Now, after we had these, now we had to figure out, how do these skills play out in everyday life? How do these skills manifest in people's everyday attitudes, behaviors, etc.? So we curated statements along those lines, and I'm going to share just a few examples of those in the next slide. So I have two of the main elements here: cognitive empathy and practicing change making. And in the center column, you can see the sample skills for each. And then the sample statements I was talking about. Now, just the very first example there, the statement is, I often wonder about how my own habits are different from those of other cultures. And so the way we've set up the questionnaire is that someone is asked to indicate how strongly they agree or disagree with the statement. And we tried our best to make sure they're not too leading or too positively biased. And so some of these would be reverse in a way. So an example is the very last one, comfort with risk, where the statement is, I only do something if I'm sure it will work. So after this was all done, we completed the validation. Now, I don't want to give away too much of this because all of you are going to see the statements because you're going to get the experience of actually taking the questionnaire. And someone is asking on the chat, I'll respond to this very quickly. How many questions in total are part of the index? So
there was one also, sorry, on further beta testing to confirm reliability and validity.
Yes, I'll get to that in a bit. So how many questions in total? So for the specific statements, assessing the skills, there are 30 statements or 30 questions. But on top of that, there's a few others where people are invited to, this is more open-ended, people are invited to share with us what kind of actions they've taken. So this is outside of the skills. Do you have plans for further beta testing to confirm reliability and validity? Yes. So the next step is we're doing two things. We're beta testing with select groups in the Ashoka community, so working with some of our fellows and our programs, but we also have plans to get the tool out to more random samples so we can normalize the tool and do more of the validity and reliability testing. So yes. And with that, I'm going to wrap up that section, and I think we're going to go right into a fun activity so all of you will see what the tool is like and get to test it out.
Wonderful, thank you, Faith. I'm going to add the link to our survey, to our tool, so that everyone can take it now. We'll be taking about 15 minutes. Would you say that that's correct, Faith? 15 minutes?
Yes.
That's what it takes. Great. And we're going to ask that everybody take it so that you can experience it with us. So just one moment, please, and I'll share the link. And just a reminder, we'll be going through questions at the end of the survey. So don't worry, we will get back to any question that you have posted already. And the link is in the chat now.
So I don't know if anyone can see the link. The suggestion is that we take a little time now for you to test this out, and then we can talk about it.
Wonderful. Well, it seems like most people are done by now. If you're not, feel free to continue finishing the survey as we start our Q&A. Again, thank you everyone for all this interest in partnership. This is really great. All right, then we'll start with Q&A. Gabriela Carrasco is asking if the tool is open for everyone to use. Yeah, Alessandro,
I can take that one. Yes, of course. We're still figuring out how to spread this in the best possible way. I mean, we're now developing a separate platform that, unfortunately, because of the global mess we're in, should have been ready by today, and it's not. So the idea is that this won't be on Qualtrics, but it will be on a platform that will allow us to collect big data, obviously anonymous, so we won't collect your personal data, but to be able to collect the results of this and be able to compare in the long run whether people in different parts of the world respond differently, and therefore calculate changemaker density here and there. So this will be on our website and it will be open to use for everyone. We are considering a system by which, if you want, on the other hand, to use it as a school or university or company and have some sort of back end in which you can access how your population answer, right? So if you want to see how your 1,000 students or 100 teachers or 50 employees respond, we will have some sort of premium version on this. But any individual who wants to take this will be able to take it for free on our website, and it will be translated in as many languages as possible. We're just waiting for the final version before engaging translators, but that's the hope. That's the plan rather than the hope.
Wonderful, thank you, Alessandro. Sandra Lafleur is asking if we can tell them more about the work already done to validate this. Faith, if you want to jump in there.
Yeah, sure. So for the validation tests, there were 3 main tests we did. One is called the discriminatory power test, which really tests how the specific statements you saw that relate to the various skills correlates with the whole questionnaire. And then we also did the alphabetity tests, which tests really the precision of the whole scale and the specific categories we have, so the subgroups. And then we also did the factor analysis test, which this is a kind of a statistical engine, if you will, that digs through the early responses we got, so all of the answers we collected, and shows how they fit and like how well they fit into actually the categories. So that's in a nutshell the 3 main validation tests we did.
And I think we can add something that relates to the question about the population. What we try to do also is to factor in any cultural bias by not testing this with people in one specific country. We tested it in 4 continents. We ran this test twice with 200 kids the first time and another 180 the second time. This was done in English, so we picked students that were diverse around the world, but that could speak English. So we tested this in North America, in Kenya, in Sweden, in India. This is where most of our of the sample within the population that we picked. Obviously, when we close on the final question, we'll translate it in a few more languages to be able to test this elsewhere. But it is built with questions that are general enough to fit most cultural regions. And most importantly, I think if we think about the what's behind the questions, the sub skills. I think if people agree that those are the sub skills, then they can be free to adapt them or to change the questions and use their own tool at that point that better reflect the translation of that skills in a different culture. But we try to make it as inclusive as possible.
Thank you. Fiona Wilson is asking if we will be able to embed the instrument in a larger instrument that they already administer annually. Yes, you can use this tool alongside with other tools that you're already using. I see that you're also asking if you can get permission to use this instrument in a smaller setting.
Yeah, what about this question? Basically, what I don't know if you guys are familiar with how Qualtrics charges, but it's per respondent. So now, I mean, you pay the fee to be here, and it's just a small amount of you, so it's absolutely built in the price of this conference. What we want to avoid is that you use this link now, because if this quickly becomes thousands of people taking it, we're charged a large bill. That's why we would ask you to wait for the new platform to be kicked off, and this is going to take days or weeks at maximum, and then we'll share this tool with all of you and everyone else around the world who wants to use it. Then of course you're free to adapt this. When we talked at the beginning about system change and framework change, we mean it. You know, for us, it's not about keeping hold of this tool. It's the more people use it, the better it is. It means that actually it has traction and people find this useful and serious. So we'll find a way for everyone to be able to use it, and only charge for it if there's a case that people can afford it, and what they're asking is more than the standard procedure. All we're asking you is to wait a little more until we finalize this and we have a new platform.
Jennifer Young is asking, where do the skills results appear? At the end of the survey, you should receive all the information with where you are on the Changemaker journey, as well as your change-making skills.
Yeah, maybe Faith, you want to say a little more? Just I just tell you what the discussion we had internally was. That in a way, ideally, I think in the back end of the tool, you'll be able to assess how much you score on each of these skills. What we wanted to avoid, and our CEO was particularly strong with his view, and I see why, is to score kids once more and telling them, you know, you get a 3 out of 7 or whatever, but rather to make this a tool of self-growth. So as you notice, you're told your strongest skill, whether or not that's very high mark or a very low one, you're always kind of positively approached with, you seem to be stronger at this, and then you're connected with resources that can make you think about other skills you may not have yet and may need to develop. However, we understand that your need as practitioners and your schools and universities may be to actually give people a score on those skills. So the next models we'll create, and the option to get a back end will make sure that people can do whatever they see fit with the data. Sorry, Faith, I ended up responding.
Yeah, that's okay. So
maybe there's something more.
Yeah, so I was just going to reiterate that we started with developing the one for youth, for young people, and we know they're being evaluated every day, and we don't want this to be yet one more evaluation. And then on top of that, we are hoping this is a tool that inspires and guides people and not disparages them. So the idea was, after taking the test, everyone comes out a winner somehow. And so no one's being told, you do not have empathy or something like that. So the way it's constructed, you'll only see your strength in a particular skill if you met like the minimum score for that. But if you didn't, we'll let you know that these are skills you should build. Yes, I'll leave it at that. And one more note, someone was asking that they close out of the browser window without being able to click on the resources that were shared. So for that, the only way to see them would be to take the test again. But there was a question earlier on that asked if you wanted those results sent to you via email, you should write it in your email. So if you wrote in your email, you should still get the whole report via email, and you'll still have access to those.
Thank you, Faith. Fiona Wilson is asking, social psychology models of planned behavior suggest that perceived feasibility, that is self-efficacy, and perceived desirability are key to ultimate action. Are any of your statements specifically intended to measure these specifically?
This is tough. I wouldn't say that they're intended to measure these specifically. We did think about this though, and we figured, if people, we were worrying about positive bias, and most of these skills we're testing for skills that people want to have, and we. So like at the core of this tool is, or we think that if people are getting an opportunity to reflect on these things, if people are getting the opportunity to ask these questions to themselves, that is success for us. And we're a lot less concerned about, how, I don't know, how accurately we're evaluating very specific things. We don't want to get too mechanical about it, because the bigger picture is more important for us. But thanks for bringing this up. It's been a tough thing to navigate.
Thank you. Chrissy Garton is asking, the different outcome levels seem to be very venture driven, the higher the density. Do you think there are more complex and open-ended ways that one could be a trailblazer, etc., without saying you have launched an original idea or venture?
Yeah, we grappled with this one ourselves. As you know, open-ended questions always offer a lot more depth, but in most cases they need a human to read them, code them, analyze them, and feed them back. And when they're done by bots with keywords and stuff, they hardly ever made sense. So since we hoped for this to be a tool that reaches hundreds of thousands, we decided to take a step back and not use any open-ended question, with the risk of doing exactly what you're describing. And obviously, as evaluators in formal education, you may want to try to test for the same skills by opening up to more open-ended questions. Someone's also said before that this can be a pre and post tool. That's very much what we also hope, and we'll use it as an internal evaluation tool on whether people change how they see themselves and their skills before or after an activity or a program we ran with them. But basically we don't want, that's what we always tell our social entrepreneurs, don't be too attached to your product, be attached to your idea. So for us, if people find better ways of phrasing these questions or better ways of answering the same questions, as long as it goes back to the same principles, we're more than happy to revise our own questions or to learn from others.
Wonderful. If there are any last minute questions, this is the time to ask them, please, on the chat. If not, Alessandro, Faith, do you have any last comments that you would like to make?
um, I'm very thankful and happy to receive so many encouraging comments. We also have a much longer sort of methodological paper that we've written that spells out all the different phases that we went through. And I think Faith mentioned it, but we partner up with the university to do this. So it wasn't ourselves actually running these tests. And so there is some sort of external validation on this. I'm going to type my email address here, and perhaps Faith and Valeria, you can do the same, or I don't know whether Jess, you can do it later on, what's easier. Because in case you want to use this tool and be part of the next beta testing, as we said, we'll get in touch with you as soon as we are ready. The person doing that will probably be Faith or probably Valeria. So should we quickly decide which one of us gets the emails?
They can come to me.
Okay.
And if I were to add, two last things would be, we're still trying to improve this tool. This is just the first iteration, and we really welcome your feedback. The questions you've been asking have been really useful. So in terms of feedback, I'd love to hear more. You can email these to me about when you were taking the test and you saw your results. What more would you want to see on the results page? Was there anything that was surprising in how you were mapped and that kind of thing? And along those lines, any ideas of how to better figure out, I don't know, different change making actions and how they map out? We're very open to even any experiences people have had measuring these kinds of things. Would love to hear that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We very much enjoyed having you here, and thank you again for logging into our conversation.